I want to work by myself in my home. And I want to work for and with a few people that I really enjoy spending time with and that I enjoy helping get results. And then the rest of the time, I want to travel. I want to go out and have beers with my wife on a Tuesday afternoon. I want to be able to drop everything and take off if I want to. And so I traded away, somebody else's dream or expectation of what my life should look like. And I just decided what I wanted it to be.
Alrighty, guys, welcome to the Actionable Advice Podcast. We are back with Jason Stapleton. Jason is a local here in Scottsdale, Arizona. I was lucky to meet him on Twitter X. Jason's been in the internet marketing space for almost 2 decades now. He's known for coining this term that we'll get into a little later here, entrepreneurial minimalism, which is basically the philosophy of emphasizing the importance of building a business that enhances your life rather than one that overtakes it. You hear this term of being a slave to your business. We'll get into why that's not worth any amount of money. But he's passionate about helping individuals achieve personal and financial autonomy. He's recently come out with a program called the Influential Writers Intensive, which we'll get into. But in the meantime, Jason, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, man. I sound old. 2 decades.
I think in the nowadays you see a lot of this internet money stuff going crazy on Twitter X or on X, and it's cool to have a voice out there that's loud and clear that is not with the hype train. Somebody who's been there and done that. And somebody who can call people out on their BS and just has the experience and not just a one-trick pony. So thanks for being that voice, dude.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, I think I think a lot of people who kind of peddle that stuff online, wherever it is, I don't think they really know. I don't really think they know that's what they're doing. I think that's kind of where they came up, and all the people they see are kind of, that's the mentality, and they think that's what they have to do. And so they just sort of regurgitate that. And, when I was younger, starting my first online business, I kind of had the same mentality. And so now that I've been around a little bit and I've seen how much damage that can do and how inaccurate it is, it bothers me now because I know how many young guys are going to, or girls who are going to really have problems as they get older, and, their lives are not going to turn out the way they want them to. And so that's kind of been my position here over the last several years, is kind of, calling it out when I see it, but more than anything, just showing people what the alternative should look like.
Why coaching and info products? I mean, I kind of know the answer because you and I have gone out to lunch and we've talked about this, but I don't think that a lot of people have clearly broken down out there that are in this space why the niche or the industry of internet marketing info products is so brilliant, and why it fits in well with your kind of theme of entrepreneurial minimalism.
Well, it's a good question. I think part of it's because it's what I know, right? I started out teaching currency trading, right, and selling courses and subscriptions on how to do that, and working with people on that. And I built my first business that way. And I didn't build it the right way. I built what was essentially a brick and mortar business that sold all of its stuff online. We didn't sell physical products; we sold digital ones. But I didn't have the sort of freedom or autonomy that I wanted. And so when I looked at starting the consulting company that I run now, that was something that was really important to me, is that I keep it small and that I actually have the lifestyle that I want to have around it. But to answer your question, the reason that we use digital businesses is that they offer income mobility. That's the one thing that you really want to have today, especially with everything that's going on in the world and in our country and taxation and, the big mess that we're in now. It's nice to have the opportunity to, if you need to be able to pick up and move somewhere else, and to have the business move with you, and more importantly, the cash flow and the income stream move with you as well. And you can't do that if you're stuck in one location, if you're geographically limited for some reason, or if your clientele is geographically limited. So while you can make a lot of money doing a ton of different things in this world, there are only a handful of things that give you that sort of autonomy, that sort of income mobility. And so that's why I do this. That's one of the reasons I do it. The other reason, I just like it. It's something that brings me a lot of fulfillment and gratification. So that's the other reason.
I've seen kind of a push online where you have other internet marketers who are pushing other people to get into info, right? They're basically pitching how everybody's got information, anybody can sell it. What's your take on that? Do you feel like it's kind of creating inflated characters?
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing. I think that when I started in 2008, we were still kind of at the very front of what is now the internet marketing or the internet revolution. And back then there were probably, there's probably 6 guys who really understood internet marketing. And most of them had been brought out and learned learn marketing from some of the old timers. So I think of guys like Frank Kern and Mark Filsame, and Jeff Walker. Jeff Walker invented the whole launch system that almost everybody uses today. And back then, information was still scattered, and the internet had been around for a while, but still, finding and aggregating information was very difficult. And so what you had are a bunch of guys in the coaching space who had been selling. If you go all the way back, one of the things I always like to say is there's nothing new in marketing, right? There's nothing new in what we're doing. If you go all the way back to old mail order stuff, there are guys who made a ton of money in the mail order business by simply learning a skill. Like, I'm going to learn how to trap animals in the wild, right? And they'd go and learn about that, and then they'd put together a little manual on how to do it, and they would write a little sales letter, and they'd mail it out to a bunch of people. People would write in and say, yeah, I want to learn how to do that, and they'd make a few bucks on every single sale that they made. And they made millions and millions and millions of dollars doing that, right? Well, there's a new version of that when we came online, where it was, okay, now we still want to know how to do things. And sure, it might be out there in the internet somewhere, but it's kind of hard to track down, and we don't really know whether we're getting all of the information. And so what we'll do is we'll compile that information in the same way that the old guys did, but we'll deliver it in video format, in recorded videos, or in PDF downloads, instead of sending actual manuals out to people. And from the early 2000s until 2015 or so, that was kind of what everybody did. And so selling courses was really popular. And if you bought courses back then, they typically didn't come with any sort of like one-on-one support. When I first started in my business, I had to make every video that I released to anybody, I had to make it downloadable, because most of my clientele didn't have enough bandwidth with the internet providers they had to stream video. That's how old it was. We're talking 720p. We're talking basic HD video. And so we had to make all that stuff downloadable. So it's just a different world. And you could charge, thousands and thousands of dollars for a very basic course on how to start an internet business or how to create a coaching product. These days, it's very different. These days, everybody has a program. Everybody's got a course, and you can get a lot of really good information for pretty cheap. And so there has been the price elasticity that you were able to get out of a coaching or a consulting business, an online business 5 or 10 years ago, just isn't there anymore. And so what you see now is that the really successful people don't sell information. They sell implementation. So they say, hey, you can do all this. I'm going to give you all this stuff and give you kind of a step-by-step process on how you do it, so you don't have to go hunt it up yourself. You'll kind of know my system. But then on top of that, there's going to be some sort of implementation that we're going to do together, so that you not only have the information, but you know how to practically apply it to whatever it is that you're doing. And I think that's where the real value is in what we do today. Is I've got, as you said, 15, 18 years of experience building online businesses, not just my own, but other people's. And so my ability to shortcut people's path to success, is significant, and much better than people who are just getting into it. I think where you run into a problem today is that they are still selling this idea that, oh, all you need to do is sell a course. Like, oh yeah, if you just create a course, you have this knowledge in your head, or even if you don't, just go learn about something and then put a course together explaining what you learn, and you can sell that and you can get rich doing it. And I think that's largely a fallacy these days. It's probably a way to do it, but it not the way it used to be. It's not nearly as valuable. And I think the people who are trying to do that today, one of the reasons they're struggling and they don't know why they're struggling so much is because they've been fed a false narrative. They've been told something that isn't true. And now they're struggling and they think it's a them problem when it's not. It's just you're dealing with information and advice that's 15 years old.
For the people that you coach and consult in your program, what do you think that the biggest mistake they're making is as far as the implementation that they know prior to meeting you and learning what you have to offer?
Well, that's a good question. I think the biggest problem is not with implementation, it's with expectation. So I tell everybody that I work with, if you're starting from zero, you can expect to work hard for the next 18 to 24 months, probably 2 years before you see any money come out of that business, any real money, right? Where you're like, oh yeah, this is working now. I kind of got this figured out. Because it takes that long to build and develop the audience, to build the trust that you need to have with them, and to refine your processes inside of the business so that you know, hey, this is what the people buy. This is how I need to sell it to them. This is where I go to find those people. And then here's how I here's how I help people get the best result they can with whatever the offer is that I'm making to them. And so there's a lot of unrealistic expectations about how much time and effort things should take. Like I posted something on X yesterday. Somebody was claiming that Dan Coe, who's one of these kind of the new version of self-help business guru, they were claiming that he makes $2 million a year writing 2 hours a day. It's nonsense. Nobody does that. I've made tens of millions of dollars selling information online. And I know lots of people who've done the same thing. There's not a single one of them who works 2 hours a day, much less writes 2 hours a day, and that's it. And that's the type of stuff that I think I hate more than anything, is because then what you get are people who are angry, they're jaded. You've taken a hope or a dream that they had, you've given them an improper expectation, and then they feel like there's something wrong with them. It's like, there's nothing wrong with you. If you've been doing this a year and a half, and you're still trying to get some traction, that's normal, right? But that's the sort of stuff that gets peddled because, it goes back to old copywriting hacks and tricks, is that, hey, I'm just going to make it seem way easier than it is. And in copywriting, there's a point where we have to do that, where we need to diminish the effort, the appeared effort it takes, but you don't want to lie to people. Right. And that's what a lot of these guys are doing. And that's what I hate more than anything when I see it, is these guys are either overtly lying. They know they're doing it, or they don't know that they're doing it. They actually think that what they're claiming is possible, even though they haven't done it.
They're basically bullshitting people.
Yeah. Well, and to a degree, all of the copywriting we do has a hint of that in it. Right. But we don't want our exaggeration or maybe we don't want that to turn into deceit. And I think that's where I struggle the most today, is that I would rather be brutally honest with people, because I know that if I'm brutally honest and they still want to work with me, that they have the right mindset. And they're not going to have this expectation that, oh, you're going to come in and you're going to take a month-long program with me and suddenly you're going to be an expert. It's like, no, we're going to teach you the foundations, and then you got to continue to implement in the months and years to come.
So I totally agree with you. And I have a ton of follow-up questions, but I want to kind of organize them. I want to get into writing and copywriting in general and why that's an important skill. But in today's world, from what you've seen, because you've touched a lot of businesses, you have a lot of perspective on this. What are and I'm going to pigeonhole it into 3 skills. What are the top 3 skills that somebody who's either already an existing entrepreneur, they've been in the game for a while, but they want to kind of hone in on it, or somebody who's starting out, what are the top 3 skills that they need to have in today's age, today's business world?
Well, the number one skill that you have to acquire is communication skills, is the ability to effectively communicate your value or the value of your product or service to somebody else. If you cannot do that, it doesn't matter how good the product is. And I think that's another fallacy that people have. It's the old, if you build it, they will come. It's like, no, I'm going to spend all of my time developing this product that's 10 times as good as anything else that's on the market. And people are just going to see that. And once they realize it, they're going to come and give me money, and then they're going to tell all their friends, and I don't even need to worry about sales and marketing. And that's a very quick way to kill a dream before it gets started, is that most people don't just show up. They're not just standing in line waiting to give you money because you created this great thing. People are incredibly self-interested. They want to know what you're doing for them. And they want to know, hey, if I give you my time, my attention, and my money, what are you going to do for me? And more importantly, how certain am I that if I do what you say I'm supposed to do, that I will get the result that I want, right? So when it comes to communication in business, there are two primary areas that we focus on. One of them is persuasive communication, and the other one is influential communication. They're very different things. So persuasive communication is what you say is copywriting, right? It's taking someone who doesn't have a lot of faith or trust in you, and in a very short period of time, trying to build enough confidence in them that they will spend money with you. And that was born out of the need, as I said, back in the day when people were doing a lot of direct mail, and they needed to be, because direct mail was very expensive. They needed to be able to rapidly build trust and trust in the product creator and in the product in order to get them to purchase. But that's a huge hurdle to climb. You can think about it like, imagine that you were trying to sell solar systems door to door. And you show up and you're knocking on somebody's door and they weren't expecting to hear from you. And now you're standing in front of them at 6 o'clock at night. Wife's in there cooking dinner. Husband's just got off work. Kids are screaming and excited. You open the door and now you've got about 5 seconds to convince them to keep that door open and to hear your opening line, right? That's your headline if you're writing sales copy. Then once you got them at least peaked before they're going to slam the door in your face, now you got to have follow-up. And then in that narrow window of maybe an hour that you're going to spend with them, you're going to have to sell them thousands and thousands of dollars worth of solar equipment, right? I did this when I first got out of the military. One of my first jobs was selling ADT security systems door to door. And I realized just how intrusive that type of marketing is. And copywriting is a lot the same way. You're interrupting somebody's day who doesn't know you, who isn't interested in you at all, and you got to try and sell them some stuff, and you don't have much time to do it at all. Now, copywriting is a really important part of what we do as business owners and marketers, right? But just as important, and one that doesn't get nearly enough attention, is the influential communication. And when we're trying to influence, we're not trying to convince anybody of anything. What we're trying to do is build rapport and build trust and affinity with the people that we come into contact with, so that when the time comes to make them an offer, we don't have to do a lot of selling, because they don't need to be sold. They already believe in you. They already know, like, and trust you. They already are interested in the same things that you're interested in. You share common beliefs and worldview. And now when it comes time for them to buy, there's much less of a hurdle to get over. And so what I see now online is everybody focuses on copywriting. Hey, what do I got to put into the DM to get people to respond to me? What do I need to write on my sales page to convince people to buy? And what I don't see nearly enough attention being given to is, hey, how am I building this list of people who I can develop a relationship with in advance, and then nurturing them for weeks or months, or in some cases years, until they get to a point where they're ready to spend money with me. There's very little of that. And I think there needs to be a lot more of it.
Damn. So just to quickly wrap up that question, what would you say the other two skills are? Sales, definitely.
Yeah. So sales is one. You got to know how to communicate with sales. You got to know how to deal with people and customer complaints, because they're going to come up. if you do a good job, there'll be fewer than you probably need, but you need to know how to handle those things when they come up so that you can maintain a good relationship, even when things go bad, because we're going to screw up. You're going to promise to do something and you're going to forget, and somebody's going to be upset because they got billed on a credit card after they canceled their order, and you're going to have to go in and, apologize and fix it. So you need to be able to do that as well. And I think the other skill that I'm probably the worst at is networking. I think the three most important things that we have in our lives are our time, our attention, and our network, right? And as a business owner, you need to be networking with other people who are both in your industry and outside of it, and developing those relationships, because those relationships can feed you, can feed a lot of your business, and are going to help support you and keep you up to date on the new stuff that's happening and new things that people are trying that are working. And if you're just got your head down and you're working on your computer all day and you're not spending any time out with other people, you lose that. And that's one of the reasons we met, is because I wanted to meet some people in the Scottsdale area who own businesses. And so I just put it out on X, and that's how we met. Well, that was in an effort to increase my local network of people that I could, talk to and get advice from and share what's working now stuff. And those are really important. And I think a lot of us who are more introverted and we work on, online, sometimes we don't do a very good job of doing that.
Yeah, that's definitely something we talked about. I struggle with that, and something I'm going to put more effort into. So I want to get into cultivating an audience, because I think you're 100% right. As I kind of study the internet marketers that are out there right now, there's a lot of hacks out there. And as our mutual friend, who was actually on the previous episode, Anthony Garone, talks about, he's like, hacks are for hacks. It's like, it's all BS, right? So let's get into some of the more tactical stuff into, in regards to cultivating an audience. I think a lot of people, they have scripts in terms of like what scripts and structures as far as like how to cold email, how to cold DM and all that stuff. And that'll get you to a certain place, but it's all short, quick and easy stuff, right? What you're talking about is building a real business, something that's long-term. And an audience, a real audience, doesn't just pop up, right? They're cultivated over time and you build a relationship with them. This might be a simple question to you, but I think a lot of people out there wonder, how do people go about building an audience? How do you actually connect with people out there? Do you just make a ton of video content? Do you just show your face? What's the right medium? Some people are just, they only write on X, right? So it's kind of a two-part question. How do you go about cultivating an audience, and on what medium should you choose to cultivate that audience?
Well, the medium's not nearly as important as a lot of people say. It does matter to a degree once you know a few other things, but I wouldn't start with that. The most important thing is that, well, let me explain how people do it the wrong way. That'd be easier. Is they want to get into a specific industry. Let's just use fitness, because everybody kind of gets that, right? They want to get into the fitness industry, and they want to be like some of the other fitness coaches that they see, because they really like working out and they know as much about it as anybody does, and nutrition. And so they really want to help old guys like me in their 40s who sit at a desk all day to get back into shape. And so they decide that's going to be their niche. And so what they do is they go look at all the other guys who are selling a similar thing, and they try and be like that person. And so they go out, they say the same things, they watch how they frame up their Twitter posts or their LinkedIn posts, and they do their videos, and they mimic. And when you're first starting out, that's the only way you do it. When you want to become a writer, you go and look at good writers, and you sort of write sort of like them. And copywriting is the same way. If you created film, you'll go out and you'll follow what your favorite directors do, and you'll try and mimic that. That's kind of the first stage of learning how to do anything. But that will never get you what you want. All right. Instead, what you have to do is you have to say, okay, I want to work in the fitness industry, and I want to work with 40-year-olds who are, who are making money but have lost their body, and I want to help them get their health back. Okay. What is wrong with the way that's being sold now? What are people saying that I think is BS? What are the old tactics, the old way of doing things that don't work anymore, but the people at the top are still pushing as the way you do things? Because in any industry, what you have is the people who are at the top are people who have come up over years or decades of time. And most of them have a way of doing things that they've done forever. And despite new information that have come in or new techniques or strategies, they're still kind of preaching the same message because that's what's generating them money. And there's a ton of information in there that just is flat out wrong. You said something very nice to me when we had lunch. You say that, I just tell it like it is. Well, part of that's deliberate in the sense that I can look around and I can see what's broken with what people are talking about. And what I do is I now come with a different perspective. So there needs to be a distinct difference when you're trying to build an audience between what you are saying and what you believe and what everybody else in your industry believes and says. Right? It's kind of like Atkins. When Atkins came out with his diet, he was like, just don't eat carbs and you'll lose weight. And everybody else in the medical industry was like, that's bonkers. That is an idiotic. Just look at the table, the pyramid. You got to have the grains at the bottom. But over time, people figured out he was right. And he was able to establish a foothold as an expert in that field because he was doing something so radically different. So the best thing that you can do is create what's called a category of one. I interviewed some guys on my podcast, Christopher Lockhead, who invented this concept of category design, which it incorporates branding, but really at its core, what it is, hey, how do I differentiate? How do I do something or create something that is completely different from everything else that's out there and available? And when you do it right, you start to attract people. So the other day I posted something on X mocking somebody who had posted something that was ridiculous. Like you can work 2 hours a day and make millions of dollars, right? Well, when I mock a person like that and I call it out and I say that's BS, there's a ton of people out there who are thinking it, but who aren't going to say it because they're not going to go against what one of the big guys is saying because they don't want to get attacked online. They don't want to be abused. They're worried that they might not be right. I just got more experience and I already know I'm right. So I don't mind. Come and attack me. It's fine because the people who are going to attack you, they're not going to listen to you anyway. But there are a legion of people who believe it, but nobody's saying it. And when you do that, you become magnetic to those people. They get sucked into you. And now you can start to build and cultivate this audience that thinks and believes like you and who now isn't afraid to talk about it. When I talk about building audiences, one of the things I say is you need to create a place for them, right? There needs to be a place where they can go. So take Andrew Tate, for example. Love him or hate him, Andrew Tate has created a place for his audience. It's not a physical location. It's not even a digital location. What it is it's a place in their minds where they're allowed to feel and do and say what they've wanted to say, but they weren't able to do it because it was socially unacceptable. Now Andrew Tate comes in and he starts saying it. And now he's got this legion of young followers who think it's okay, to be womanizers, to be abusers. He's given them a space to do that. And so whatever you want to do in whatever industry you want to build an audience around, you have to create that place for them. And you have to be the person that they can anchor themselves to and give them the confidence to be, do, or feel whatever it is that they want. That's foundationally what building an audience is about.
So this is actionable advice, right? So we got to get into the nitty gritty here, as you know I like to do, into the how-to part. So if I was to implement what you're saying, let's talk about the fitness niche because you brought it up. You'd go and you'd look at the people who are doing big things in that niche, right? Let's say the influencers. And instead of copying them, you might want to look into their comments, right? Because you kind of want to mind read and find out what's that spot that you can carve out for yourself, how you can zig when they're zagging, right? So would you say that the lowest hanging fruit there is to go and look at somebody's comments and see what kind of questions people are asking, or what are the holes that these influencers are not filling? Because maybe they're looking for the big broad sweeps, since they've amassed such a big audience, and you can come in by, either answering niche questions or filling a void that they haven't. What would you do?
Well, the assumption in your question is that the person going and doing the looking doesn't have an opinion of their own. Right. If you don't really have an opinion about what should be different and what other people are doing wrong and that you could do better, then you need to go find that, right? It means you don't know enough about the industry, or you don't know enough about what everybody else is saying to have a counter argument or a counter opinion. The way somebody with no experience and no knowledge would do it would to go and look at what everybody's saying and maybe some of the complaints people are coming up with in the comments, and then starting to develop an opinion around that. But I think that's the wrong way to do it. I think you have to start understanding what's broken in the industry you want to be in. See, there is no, I don't know anything about this space, but I think I can make some money in here. So now I'm going to go and research it until I feel like I know enough. And then I'm going to just go out and call myself an expert online. Where our world is littered with low value people like that. That's not the way you do it. The way you do it is you find something that you're truly passionate about, that you want to consume and know everything about. And then you go out and you practice that thing. And you practice it until you feel as though you've achieved a level of expertise where you're qualified to give somebody else advice and counsel. And only then now do you now you say to yourself, well, okay, now how do I position myself? How am I going to be different than everybody else? What am I going to say, or what advice am I going to give that's going to be radically different than what most of the other big players in my space are saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, but is there a criteria or a bar that you have to reach to become that person?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. Some people will say, well, first of all, an expert is somebody who defines themselves as such, right? So there's nobody who ominous dominus is around giving expert certifications to people, right? If they are, it's because they figured out a scam to give people, credentials. So in order for you to be seen as an expert, I think what you've got to do is you've got to be far enough ahead of the person in front of you that they would derive a great deal of value from hearing what you have to say. Now, where is that line at? I don't know. If they're trying to sell you on becoming a coach or a consultant, they're going to tell you, well, you only have to be one step ahead. Look at yourself 6 months ago, and that's who you write to, right? But I see a lot of guys online who are giving advice to their 6-month-old self, and it's still bad advice, right? Because they still don't really know what they're talking about. They've just been hanging around it for 6 months. So I don't know that there's a line, but I think if you want to err on the side of continuing to educate and implement first. I know that's probably not the answer you want to hear. But
no, I'm not looking for like a particular right answer. I'm curious in general what one might have to say about that. I think if that question was turned on me, I'd probably say that it's probably outcome based, right? Like if you look at let's go back to the Atkins diet, right? So everybody was saying carbs is fine. Like you said it yourself, right? Like all the doctors were saying it's the bottom thing on the food pyramid, right? It's the base that everything's built on. It's possible, and I don't know the full story, so I'm guessing, right? But this kind of methodology, I'm sure it could be copy pasted elsewhere, that Atkins, he had results. He had positive outcomes from whatever his methodology was, right? So under the table, under the radar, before anybody even knew about him and his diet, he probably told his friends and said, hey, you should try this thing, right? And they had outcomes, right? So good product, no marketing, right? Because he doesn't have an opinion. It's only in his small circle. So maybe the bar or the threshold here is that whatever you have to say has had to have worked, right? And not only has it had to have worked, it has to have worked in a way that's unique and different to what other people are doing, right? If you use that criteria, right? Atkins, the Atkins diet was completely different than what everybody else was talking about at the time. They're like, yeah, totally eat carbs as part of the diet. You have to have it. He said no. And not only did he say you shouldn't have carbs, he's probably told people to try this diet, right? Cost them nothing. They're just like, just don't buy bread, don't eat pasta. And it worked out for them. So it worked out for them. He's like, well, hey, like I should, turn this into a real diet and put it out there. Then you have the Atkins diet. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So let me give you a different example that might help. And this is, again, I preface this by saying that if you're new at what you're doing, I'm not saying that you have to wait decades before you do anything. What I'm saying is you have to know enough about what you did to know whether or not you can whether it's repeatable. So, about a year ago, there were a bunch of young hustlers on X who had been able to grow a following really quickly. So they grew from like nothing to thousands of followers within a couple of months. And then they built a name for themselves on platform as being people who could build audiences quickly, as experts at building on this platform, right? So then they launched a program where they brought in a bunch of people and taught them the system. Okay. Nothing wrong with any of that. And they made, I don't know, let's say they made $50,000, $60,000 off of the launch of that campaign. So then they go out and they broadcast that not only are they experts at building on X, but they're also experts at building businesses online because they just did a launch and made $60,000. And, they're showing all the images and snapshots of the money that they've made. So now all the little minion of followers who came on board around the same time as them, now look at them and they are considered to be the experts on platform at how to build audiences and how to sell products. They've been in the industry a whole total of 6 months. Okay. Not to diminish anything that they did, but here's what happened. X changed its algorithm. And all of a sudden, where it used to be super easy to just comment and post on people and you would get that reach and people would show up, now all of a sudden it's super hard. And it's almost impossible now to replicate those sort of results. Okay. Then I see them come out and they say, because now it's more difficult. They're having trouble, probably reselling the same product, because the more times you resell the same thing to the same audience, the lower the results. So now the claim is that they're making is that if you join our program, you will make $1,500 within your first 30 days. Okay. Starting from zero. Now, me being around as long as I have and having coached as many, nobody's going to do that, right? There will be a total of 0 people who show up with no audience and nothing. They're going to build an audience and sell $1,500 worth of stuff in 30 days. There's too much to learn, right? See, now we've gone from, hey, I do have a little bit of expertise. I know a little bit about something and I'm charging people to tell them what I know, to I'm a total expert at this. And I guarantee you, if you give me $500, you'll make $1,500. See, that's when we bleed over into, well, now you're way outside of your depth. Now you're being dishonest. Now, not only does the way you did it not work anymore, right? Because times have changed, but now you're making unsubstantiated claims about how much money you can make for people. And that's where you get into trouble. So I think when it comes to results, going back to what you were saying, I think if we're being results based, most people can't get a very good result for their clients because they just haven't been doing it very long, right? And so the claims that they can make and the proof that they can offer is minimal. And so you can't make a lot of money. You can't charge thousands of dollars for a consulting job or a coaching job if they don't have some assurance that you're going to be able to deliver, if you can't deliver a multiple of that. And so instead of just saying, hey, I'll sell you my knowledge for $25, they make some absurd claim that they can't back up. And then people are upset and jaded. And the trick there, if you're running a scam business, is that you blame the other person. You say, well, the reason you didn't get results is because you didn't do it right, right? It's shameful And it's one of the things I hate most about this industry.
I want to hear offline more about
Like, we
this.
don't have to do it offline. We can talk about it online.
No, I'm just super curious, but no, it's funny. You mentioned the X algorithm. I saw that you made another post about that, about how difficult it's been lately. But part of it is beating the status quo, right? You have to have an alternative to the status quo, right? I don't know why I'm kind of stuck on the subject, but I kind of want to like simplify it. I want to like find a closure to this. And maybe it's something that you can incorporate into your language and programming, but there's a lot of people right now that are trying to build not just, coaching programs or consulting or info products, but they're trying to build a personal brand, right? And I think that people are having a difficult time. I guess the basic mainstream way of putting it is cutting through the noise, right? Just because it's so easy, it's so accessible. Like, you can find a video editor for pretty cheap. You can, most people are ripping off each other's content. In fact, I've seen people's programs where in the program itself, like, they're like, go sort based on, there's a plugin where you could sort off of the most popular post that anyone's ever done. There's like an extension, I think it's called Sort for TikTok, which turned out to be like a super malware infested thing. But it'll sort people's videos by popularity, and then you find the popular video. You're like, well, if it blew up once, it'll blow up again. I'll just rip it off in a different way. ChatGPT, rewrite this script, bang, they'll make these videos. But that goes in the face of everything that you were just talking about, where it's just not sustainable, and you're not going to build or cultivate like a deep connection with an audience just because you're putting videos out.
Well, they're frauds. That's all there is to it. If you're, they don't know what to do. They don't know what to say. They don't really know much about how to communicate the value that they have, because they don't have much value. And so instead they go and rip off other people because they think the name of the game to getting above the noise is some hacky hook or some formula that somebody else has mastered. And what they don't realize is that that's not how you build a brand. That's not how you build an audience. You build a brand by being radically different than everybody else. And unfortunately, that usually means you grow a lot slower. So if you want to grow a gigantic audience on X, then you do exactly what you said. You go out and find the top posts that everybody else has made, and you copy them, change a couple of words, and you repost it. And you do that consistently for long enough, and you'll grow this big audience. Okay. But that's not the way to, you're never going to monetize that audience, right? You're not different. You're just exactly the same. And there's a ton of people out there who have gigantic audiences, but aren't making any money with them, because under the hood, once you pull back all of that, all that fake stuff that they've been posting of other people's, there's nothing there. And so, you have to be radically different. And the people who are radically different, they take longer to grow. It's because what they're saying is different than what everybody else is saying. And so they get a lot of pushback. A lot of people tell them, hey, you're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. Why are you saying this? Why are you attacking these guys? These guys are the best. Look at everything that they've done. And it's like, okay, if you want to build a big audience, mimic somebody else. If you want to build a brand, you be radically different.
There's been a big push lately, from what I've seen, maybe you've seen differently, for people to start building a personal brand. It seems like there's a message out there that everybody needs to start building a personal brand. It's a must. They'll pitch you video content. They'll say you have to build a brand on Twitter. This is where I get all my business from, yada, yada, different flavors of the same message. Inevitably, I have to ask this question because you've built, in my opinion, a pretty awesome personal brand. And your personal brand is not only true to who you are online, but offline, you're basically the same guy, which I think is rare, because a lot of people, they'll put on some kind of facade. That being said, if you were to start over today from 0 followers, but you had all the know-how that you have now. What would you do differently in building a personal brand in today's environment? Considering it's so noisy, considering everybody's pushing on short form content, highly edited, all this stuff, what would you be doing? There's no
I'd
easy
probably be
questions here.
looking. Well, it is. It's more difficult today because everybody's trying to do it, right? Before, well, it's difficult for different reasons, right? So 10, 15 years ago, it was difficult because people were still nervous about giving you their credit card information over the internet. I mean, I remember first couple of times I did launches for my trading company. I would have people call me up on the phone and just say, "Hey, I'm just not interested. I don't want to put my credit card information over the internet. Can I just read it to you?" I'd be like, "Yeah, okay, go ahead." And I'd pull up the computer to the sales page and they'd read me the credit card information and I'd punch it into the computer the same way they would have and click send. But there was this aversion to it. There was also an aversion at the time to buying courses online. People, that was not it. That in and of itself was kind of a scammy thing to do. Going to college wasn't, but if you bought a course online from somebody, that was somehow weird. I remember when my business partner told me I should go buy a course by a guy. It was Ryan Dice. And I remember thinking, dude, you mean buy one of those like courses that they sell online? Isn't that kind of scammy? He's like, no, dude, it's a really good course. I went through it and you should go through it too. And that was the first one I ever bought. But even I had that. And that was 2006 or something, 2007. And so even I thought it was a little scammy. Today, we don't have that problem. We buy courses all the time. Lots of people, in fact, they've got course overload. They got course burnout at this point. Today, the bigger problem is there's so much noise out there. Is getting attention and holding attention is really difficult at the beginning. As I said, the best thing to do is to be radically different. What I would probably do if I was starting over from scratch is I would try and find 2 or 3 other people who are kind of in the same boat I was in and who all had the same general opinion that I did. And I would try and do some sort of collaboration with them to try and join forces to grow our audiences together and make it look like, hey, we're starting a movement. And our movement is radically different than everybody else's. And if you're tired of all the other stuff that you're seeing out there, and if you try that other stuff and it doesn't work, and you're jaded and angry and frustrated, well, hey, come over here because we were too. And now we're doing something different. And you give them not just a place to go, but you give them a new faith to follow.
That actually makes a lot of sense in a world where people are kind of finding things to cling to. You see people doing this actually on X. I've seen a couple people, I won't name any names, but I've seen some people, they'll write cult leader in their bio on X, but they're all alone. They just have a big following and they think that they're a cult leader all of a sudden. But the movement thing makes a lot of sense. Because I think these days you have we talked about this, people who are status quo and people who are looking for radical change. And it seems like a lot of the people who are in the radical change camp, the people who are just like looking for the latest hack, the latest next best thing, they kind of get stuck in that state. They don't really ever leave. They'll like collect silver bullets, right? People just want one silver bullet to get out of their situation, but they'll have like a satchel, if you will, and they're just constantly collecting these things. So they'll collect these, I guess, influencers, right? Because they're following people's video content, they're following people on X, and they're constantly looking for these hacks. So they'll collect hack distributors,
yeah,
and sort of follow them nonstop.
Part of that goes to human psychology. Is that, hey, so I teach a copywriting clinic every year. And I keep it the same. I would probably double or triple the sales every year if I changed what we did in the copy clinic. Because I would have copywriting clients who would come and go every year and would drop the $3,000, $4,000 to be part of the clinic if I changed it up every year. Because what people want is they want new and they want different. right? And so if you're selling the same thing over and over again, people just get tired of it. They're like, oh, that's yesterday's news, and they want something different. And so when you're in that business, you have one of two choices. You can either continue to acquire new prospects that you can convert into clients, which is very time consuming and expensive, or I can create something new and sell that new thing to my same group of people. And so what you see with that is people get burned out of hearing your same three pitches or your same three ideas and concepts all day long. So they go out and they farm other people's ideas and other people's information, and then they regurgitate it. They're like a reporter. They go out and they're like, I studied, one of the big ones on X right now is, I studied this guy for X number of hours so that you don't have to. And here's the 9 things that takeaways I had from him. It's garbage, right? It's just garbage information. But everybody wants to know. It's very clickbaity. It's very, clickbait. Clickbait's probably the wrong word, but it's very engagement bait is what I call it. They're looking for engagement, clicks, likes, follows, and it's really good for that. And that's just the nature of human beings. There's a degree of that to all of us.
Yeah, if you were to like psychoanalyze that headline, they're basically creating a distance between you and them, calling themselves the authority. First of all, nobody's studied thousands of hours of any one thing, in my opinion, if they're making like one little video about it. Because if you see like their past history, I've seen these headlines a lot. They'll have 20 different things that they've spent thousands of hours studying. It's like you're 2, maybe 3 decades old, but you've spent like 6 decades studying just this one thing. It doesn't make any sense at all.
Think about the logic behind this. So let's carry that idea forward, right?
Yeah.
Let's say, and again, this is a difference between, do you want a big audience or do you want people who are going to give you money to get result? Okay. So let's carry that idea forward. I see this a lot on YouTube is I read 18 financial books and here are the top 5 takeaways from those books. Who's the person who watches that video or who reads that post? It's a lazy person who doesn't want to read and who doesn't want to do any research and who just wants to be fed, right? They're not doers. They're just people who want stuff delivered to them on a platter. Now, if you're in the coaching or the consulting business, is that the client you want? Is that who you want to be working with? Somebody who does crap like that? No. So you might develop a big audience doing that, but whoever you're going to sell your product to is going to have an expectation that they're not going to have to do anything because they don't want to do anything. So you got to be very careful when you're collecting that audience and when you're what you're posting to try and attract people. It goes back to, what kind of person do I want to work with? Who is this person? What is my expectation of them? And most people don't consider that.
When you're developing this persona, right? I totally get it. When you talk about how you don't want to attract these like beginner audience that is broke, but they want all the answers, but they don't want to pay. Like, you're just going to be collecting an audience of these silver bullet catchers. But when you're trying to customize your audience, right, and you're trying to kind of cultivate them in advance, how do you go about doing that? Is it about like something that you probably agree with is experts ask different level of questions. They're asking completely different questions than a beginner would, right? So Are you kind of cultivating to the level of questions? Like it's kind of a tier, right? Like a beginner's asking questions that are like at this level. They're like, how to get started, right? Somebody who's in the middle might be asking, how do you expand, right? Slightly expand, maybe another offer, maybe a different ICP. And then somebody who's at the next level, they might be like, I've maxed out these acquisition channels. I'm looking to scale even further next level, right? That's the type of questions that somebody's asking at that level. What would be the kind of not low-hanging fruit, but how would you go about doing that in terms of cultivating a specific kind of audience ahead of time?
Yeah, that's a good question. So you do it using the way you communicate with them. So I don't want any I'm just getting started people.
Right.
I don't want them in my business. I don't want them around, not because I don't like people who are getting started, but because they have no sunken cost. They've made no investment in time or energy, and they're just like, I'm getting into this. I don't want a client like that. Right. I want a client who at least already has an idea, is already starting to build the business, it wants to be able to either go faster or wants a more complete understanding or some coaching on what to be doing at every single step of that process. Right. So I talk some about building alternative revenue streams to say, hey, you need to do that. But I don't really have any programs for those people. I have programs for people who've got their stuff figured out. And what I look for is I look not necessarily for people who are at a certain level. I look more for somebody who is hungry, who is desperate for change. You know, we've talked about this before, you and I offline, but we only sell two things. We either sell transformation or identity reinforcement. Okay. And to give you an example, nobody buys a Gucci handbag for transformation. They buy it because they want to signal to others, or they want to reinforce what they believe to be true about themselves. It's identity reinforcement. Same thing for buying a sports car in your 50s. Once you're trying to prove to yourself and everybody else that you're still young and cool. Okay. What most of us sell, who are selling, information or how to or help consulting, we're selling some form of transformation. And so I don't care how much experience you have. I don't particularly care how much money you have, as long as you can afford to pay for whatever you're buying. What I want and what I look for is somebody who is desperate for that change, who's like, I don't care what it takes. I don't care how long it takes. I don't care how much time I have to invest in it. I can't stay where I am now. Things cannot stay the way they are, right? That's the person that I want, because that's a person I can give direction to, and I know that they are going to go out and do it. Okay. So those are the things. And so when I communicate, it's a lot of that. When I write to people in my newsletter, when I post things online, it's all has that sort of vibe to it. And your audience can probably tell, just I'm kind of a rough around the edges person. I don't pull a lot of punches. I kind of tell people what I think, and I don't really care if they don't like it. A lot of people say that, but I mean, and when I was younger, I definitely cared, but I don't anymore. And so people who come to me know that about me, and they're expecting it, and they come to me because that's what they want. And I attract people who have that mentality. And that all comes down with how you communicate. Going back to the very beginning of our talk, it's all in how you communicate.
I just had a thought. You're like the Henry Rollins of internet marketing. You know who that is?
I'm not that rough, I don't think, but
not that rough. He's a bit softer now, but I've seen him in some interviews, and I see a lot of similarities of where you just like, you carve your own path. You're like, this is what I am. This is what I like. He's obsessed with working. He talks about that all the time.
Yeah. I think people who love what they do like working. It's one of my principles in entrepreneurial minimalism is that, man, most of us are going to work until we can't physically work anymore. You know, this idea not only is retirement not a good thing for your health and in your mental and physical health, but most of the pipe dream that's sold about retirement just doesn't end up materializing for the majority of people. So if you're going to assume that, hey, work is going to be part of your life until you're 70, 75, maybe older, then the goal shouldn't be, how do I make as much money as fast as I can? Or how do I burn myself out working 80 or 90 hour weeks to make my fortune, which is what a lot of young guys do. It should be, all right, how do I wake up every day and do something that I love, something that I find meaningful and fulfilling? And how do I incorporate that into a life that isn't all about work, but that encompasses all the things that are important to me, family and friendships and vacations and seeing the world. There's too many people who think, well, I'll start traveling, or once I start making good money, or once I'm a millionaire and I've worked all this hard when in my early days, then I can relax a little bit. But that's not what happens. What happens is you build this machine that has to be fed. And instead of having the life you want, you end up building yourself a prison business. And my philosophy since leaving my first company is, man, I don't want a life like that. I don't need to make millions. I've made plenty of millions. I want to be able to wake up every day and have no restrictions on what I do that day.
So we've talked about this concept of a North Star. And to be honest with you, I thought a lot about it over the past week. I think it's been a week and a half since we went and got lunch. And you hear this question thrown around a lot, right? And some people would call it a newbie question. Some people would call it an advanced question. I guess it just depends on what your take is. But like, some people ask, like, how do you find your North Star? And I think finding your North Star, in my opinion, is like, it's too unpredictable of a question. And it's probably not the right question to be asking. I think, in my opinion, and tell me if you agree with this, it's not about finding the North Star. It's about figuring out the next season that'll get you to closer to that answer, right? Because another thing that we talked about, so much we talked about offline, as a product of immigrant parents, I was forced to go to university. I talk about this all the time, and I think it's stupid that at 18 you have to like pick this major, and at 22, if you didn't graduate early like I did, you are forced to pick a career path, and like, guess what? That's what you're going to be doing for the next 40-ish years, and that's it. Which I think is dumb, because like, you've hardly found yourself. Like, maybe you've discovered what your favorite beer or tequila is in college, and this and that. But figuring out the next season, I think, is arguably a much more productive thing to do than figuring out the North Star. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a better way to look at it. I think that for most of your life, coming up into your early 20s, you have been living someone else's expectation, right? So life has kind of been planned out for you, for most people, that you're going to go to high school and you're going to get good grades in high school. And yeah, you can play around with the drama club or sports or whatever it is that you do. But you're going to go to college, because if you don't, you're a loser and it's going to be stuck in your own hometown again. And you don't want to go to JUCO, because that's even worse, right? And so you go to college, and by the time your second year of college, when you're still on somebody else's plan and you haven't really lived outside the dorms and been on your own at all, they want you to pick a career and know what you're going to do. And then you spend another 2 years trying to learn that career, even if you don't know much about it and you've never spent any time actually doing the work. And by the time you're done, you're supposed to have found a mate, especially if you live in the Midwest like I did. By the time you're done with college, you're expected to have found the person that you're going to buy a house and raise kids with. And then you're supposed to find yourself a job, one of them good jobs, because you now got yourself a college degree, and start building your family. That's the American dream for a lot of people. And my biggest problem with that is the two most important decisions that you'll make in your whole life is what you choose to devote your time for work doing. So what are you going to do for your work, and what meaningful, fulfilling job will you have? And secondly is, who's your partner in life going to be? And we ask kids to make that decision way too early, before they've had any life experience. And so then you got this kid who may not know what he wants to do, and he's 25, and he thinks there's something wrong with him, because you say, well, what are you going to do? What's your plan? And he's like, I don't know. I don't know what I want. I don't know what I'm interested in. I don't know, because guess what? You haven't tried anything. You haven't had 15 different jobs in different industries. You've been on this track, somebody else's track for your life. And now you feel lost at 25, like there's something wrong with you because you don't know what you want to do. And I think the way you've just expressed it is absolutely on point, is that you don't have to know what you're going to do for the next 40 or 50 years. You just got to know, hey, this is what interests me today. And this is what I'm going to pursue right now. And through that exploration of trying different things and working in this industry, I may find that I like it, or I may find I like something else far better, and I'm going to go do that. And then the next season or the next chapter of my life is going to be very different. That's an insightful thing to say as somebody in their late 20s, because I don't think a lot of people really figure that out until they lived a few seasons. And then they're like, oh shit, like, you're right. that was like a lifetime ago. That was a completely different life I lived back then. And now I have this one. And the one I got today will probably be different than the one 20 years from now. That to me is part of the joy of life. That's of never settling down and getting into this rut that a lot of people find themselves in. And for the small percentage of people who just want to live in a rut, then more power to them. It's like there's a very small percentage, like 0.5% of the population that just wants to go live in the woods in a cabin and never talk to anybody, right? Those people are out there, and to them, more power to them. But that's not the truth for most of us. Most of us need people. We're a communal species. And the same is true for your life, is that for most people, getting in a rut is death. I'm writing this short story right now, and it's exactly about that. It's about a guy who ends up stopping off at a liquor store to buy a bottle of wine for his wife because they're going to have dinner that night with another couple, and he gets shot. And the whole story is about his life and how really on the surface he looks like a reasonably successful middle-aged guy with a family, and that by all normal standards he would be considered successful. But inside, once you break it down, man, he's miserable. His life didn't turn out the way he wanted it to. And he's having dinner with people he hates, and his marriage is on the rocks. And, he's working at a job that he never wanted to be in. So, it's basically taking this concept that I have, that we just talked about, and laying it out in narrative and fiction narrative. But I really do believe that most men, as Walden said, as Thoreau said, lead lives of quiet desperation. And that's sad to me, because life shouldn't be that way.
You know what I never hear people talk about, even business owners or entrepreneurs? I never hear the advice of you should choose what you're going to do based around the lifestyle that you want to live. Maybe I'm listening to the wrong people. And the reason I think that's interesting is, at one point I wanted to learn how to code, and there's different ways that you can search a database. One of them is like a linear search, where you're like, say you're going from 1 to 100, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you're looking for the number. Say the number's 59, you're going to go through 58 before you hit 59. That's 58 steps. Or you can do a binary search, where you go from one end to the other. If the number is 99, you would have hit it in one spot. If the number is 50, you would have hit it in whatever that is, 49 or something like that. Anyway, long story short, binary is confined and starts at both ends, right? So it constricts this way. When you're picking what you want to do, or you want to have a rough idea of what you want to do, I think it's a lot easier to start from the constriction of a lifestyle that you want to live, because that eliminates a lot of options, right? Like if you want to have a lot of freedom and travel, odds are you're not going to be a doctor. You might be a travel nurse, but you're not going to be a surgeon, right? That already eliminates that option. It's not going to happen for you, right? I'm curious what you think as somebody who's designed their lifestyle. And you're actually one of the few people that I know that have like deliberately designed their lifestyle. You're like, I'm giving this up to have this. We've talked about this concept of a time billionaire, right? Where there's people that make millions of dollars, but they have like the equivalent of billions in terms of time, right? They have full freedom and control. On the contrast, there's people that have billions and they have billions of dollars, but they have like no time at all for anybody. And you have to ask yourself, what's worth it to you? I'm curious to hear your thoughts as far as like lifestyle design and how somebody can create that constriction for the younger people out there that are still asking these questions of how do you come at it from that angle, the lifestyle design angle? Because I think you have it in spades. And I think that if anybody's qualified to talk about it, it's you.
Well, I can tell you the way I looked at it. And I think you're close when you talk about, hey, what sort of lifestyle do I want? But that's a tricky thing, because when people think about that, they might think, well, I want to travel the world and I want to see exotic places and I want to, I want to, and so I started differently. I said, what what makes a fulfilled life? And this came out of, I'd been falling out with a business partner, and, I had left my other business and my marriage had ended. And what I thought, the life that I thought I was building and that I wanted, I realized, man, this wasn't even close to really, I'm terribly unhappy in so many different ways. And so I started doing a lot of exploration, not just internally, but in asking some questions like, hey, what is a fulfilled life? You read you read somebody like Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, and what does it mean to have purpose for your life? What is purpose? Is that something that's given to us, or is that something that we kind of find for ourselves? And you read Nietzsche and some of the other existentialists, and then you read start learning about Stoicism and understanding the obstacle is the way, and how you should just kind of be at peace with everything, no matter what happens in your life. And here's what I came up with. As I said, this is a fulfilled life, to be able to wake up every day and do work you find meaningful, surrounded by people that you love and admire, and to be paid well for what you do. And I said, if I could get up every day and be able to do that, I think that would be fulfilling. I think a lot of people try and find happiness, and that's the wrong way. It's the wrong approach, because doesn't matter how good your life is, there are going to be times when you're just not happy. But I think even when things aren't going well and you're terribly unhappy with how things are with parts of your life, you can still feel fulfilled even when you're not happy all the time. And so I asked, okay, well, what does that mean for me? Well, I don't like meetings. I don't like other people telling me how I have to spend my day and my time. I want to be able to travel, which means I don't want to be fixed in one place. And, but I need to make enough money that I can afford to do those things, right? Because there's a balance there. You have to be able to make enough money that you can afford to do the travel. And what happens to most people is they go focus on the money part, and the travel gets pushed down the road. And I didn't want that to happen to me. And so I decided that the business I was going to start, I was going to sacrifice making a lot of money to make a good amount of money. So enough that I could do the things I wanted to do, but that didn't require me to build the infrastructure that would be necessary to kind of like have, the vanity business that a lot of people search for. So a lot of people are like, I'm building a $10 million company. I'm like, I have no desire to build a $10 million. I know what it takes to build a $10 million company, and I don't want to do it. I don't want employees. I don't want an office space. I don't want demands and fires that I have to put out all day. I want to work by myself in my home, and I want to work for and with a few people that I really enjoy spending time with and that I enjoy helping get results. And then the rest of the time, I want to travel. I want to go out and have beers with my wife on a Tuesday afternoon. I want to be able to drop everything and take off if I want to. And so I traded away, somebody else's dream or expectation of what my life should look like, and I just decided what I wanted it to be.
I think the ones, like, just sum it up, for somebody to go and apply that, it would be to try everything without expectation and measure how you feel about all that you've done, and start eliminating those things. Because if you're starting from zero, you have no idea what kind of people you like hanging out with, or what process you like doing. That's the thing. When, again, speaking of somebody, coming out of college, you are looking at life going into college through maybe like a needle.
Yeah.
You come out of college looking through life at a straw, like through a straw. And then that opens up into like a toilet paper tube, and, maybe like a gas pipe. And then after you've lived all these years and done all these things, that I think the more things that you do, like the volume of action, that aperture gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But you have to decide. Like, it reminds me of the guy that you talked about, the objective person, of somebody who committed to the rut. I think that person is actually further ahead than the guy that's still trying on all the hats, because they've already committed. They can let go of all the other options. They can just commit to the rut. Even though it's a rut, they've decided, they've made a decision. They've drawn their circle, so to speak.
Yeah. If they make that decision actively, like they knowingly make that choice and say, yes, this is what I want for my life, right?
Yeah.
Here's what happens to most people, guys like us, is that when we're young, we want to build something that people will look at us and say, yeah, dude, that guy's successful, right? Like that's what I wanted when I was young, because I grew up very poor. We never had any money. And so I wanted people, not only did I want to be successful and have money and be able to, not have to worry about what things cost, but I wanted other people to look at me, that was very vain at the time, and say, oh yeah, I wish I was as successful as him. And the problem we have is, as we start to make more money, we increase our lifestyle, right? Because now we need to have the nice car. We got a bigger house, and we got to go on nicer vacations to show off to people. And we got to throw bigger parties for people when they come over. And all of a sudden, as income increases, so does lifestyle. And the problem with us is, at some point when we're young, we start to realize, yeah, man, I'm working a lot and that's a lot of overhead here. And now I got this big house and mortgage payment. You're like, man, do I really need all of this? But you've got it up there. Now you got this lifestyle to maintain and you can't make an adjustment. I mean, for me, I had almost 8,000 square foot house. I had 12 people that I employed. We had 6,000 square feet of office space. You can't unwind that. You can't just fire everybody, stop paying your lease, sell your house and your cars, and take your kids out of private school. I mean, you could, but you're doing so many people dirty when you do that it's not, I couldn't bring myself to do something like that. So it's really important when you're in those early stages and you're trying to figure it out, right? Like, what do I want and who do I want to be around? That you don't build yourself a prison with your lifestyle that you can't back out of.
Are these the right questions to be asking?
Well, I think
not on this podcast, but as a human being, as somebody who's committed to the path of always improving, but not getting carried away with it. Are these the right questions to be asking?
I wish I knew, man. I mean, I can tell you the questions that I asked, and I can tell you the mistakes that I made and the way I adjusted. And I'm pretty happy with my life right now. I don't have a lot of complaints about my life. But I think it's naive to think that, okay, we're going to work a roadmap out here, the two of us together, and anybody listening here now is going to have a template to not make mistakes. I mean, the truth is, when you're really passionate about something, you're going to overdo it. You're going to pour yourself into it. And it's tough in the moment to step back and zoom out and really evaluate, okay, with every decision you're making, is this going to take me where I think I want to go, when in fact you may not actually know where that point is. For me, I poured myself into my first business because I loved it. It was fun building that business. And as I started to hire people, and now we had more people around and we were all working together on projects and stuff, and that was awesome for me until it wasn't. And so I don't know that I'm going to save anybody from some of the mistakes I've made, but hopefully if they listen to this and if they're at a point in their life where they're trying to reevaluate, maybe this will help them ask a few better questions before they make that next move into the new season.
Would you say that when you were in your, let's say, 20s and 30s, as you were kind of focusing in on what you were going to do for that next season, were you hard on yourself?
Oh, very.
Was it worth it?
No, it was very bad. I can remember I was in the military first. And when I got out, I was qualified to do nothing. I spent several years doing really terrible jobs. Like, I scrubbed trailers at Trans Am Trucking, this big 18-wheeler company in the Midwest. They had these big white trailers. And I would scrub them with this super corrosive stuff that they put on the side, and it would fall onto you. And I remember I would have plastic sunglasses, and after a couple of days of that corrosive goo falling down on me, my glasses would break because it would eat through the plastic on the glasses. And for years afterwards, the skin would peel inside of my ears. And then I had a couple of other really terrible jobs too before I finally settled as a sheriff's deputy. And then after that, I went overseas because I was qualified for nothing. And then when the wars kicked off in Iraq and Afghanistan, a couple of years later, I went overseas and did high threat security work for the US government there and spent years carrying a gun and getting shot at and blown up and all kinds of crazy stuff. And, I remember coming home one time. I might have been before I went overseas. I was just kind of like, didn't know what I was going to do. And I was sitting down with my grandfather. My grandfather had been wildly successful in his life. Very successful farmer, which I didn't know those existed, but he was very successful. And then later, an even more successful investor, and had made a lot of money. And I was sitting in his office, and I want to say I was 25 at the time. And I said, I was talking to him. I said, I feel like I'm falling behind. I didn't go to college. Most of the people I know are graduating colleges and they have jobs. I don't even really know what I want to do with my life. And I feel like I'm floating and I'm wasting the best years of my life. And he laughed at me. And he was a pretty somber guy. And he said, "Oh, Jason," he's like, "you got so many years left." He's like, "You're 25. You just keep pushing forward, and you'll figure it out." And part of that was because I was so driven. He might have had different advice for me if I was just a wandering imbecile that had no real, ambition in life. But I think he saw that I was smart and that I wanted to do something great, and he just encouraged me to be patient. And I do that same thing for people, for younger guys who say the same thing to me, is that, hey, just be patient, try more things, try more worthless dead end jobs until you figure out what you really are interested in, and then pour yourself into it.
And I think also talk to people, because you can download decades of perspective, like I often do with you, where
that's something you do really so good. I mean, I'm a very inquisitive person by nature. But you do it to a degree that I think is really admirable, is that you don't want to you're not just asking a question and accepting the response. You ask the question, listen to the response, and then demand the next level. It challenges me when we talk, but I think that's an exceptional thing to do if you can do that. And I think that's just a character trait of yours that is admirable, because most people don't do that.
Thanks, man. It's hardwired. I don't know how to turn it off. That's why I was asking about the being hard on yourself, because I feel like one day I'm going to look back and I'm going to be like, why did you add all that extra stress to your life?
Yeah, you will.
Just like...
You will. You'll look back. You'll wish you could go talk to your younger self and just say, "Hey, cut yourself a break. Be patient. But the question is, here's the philosophical question: is if you do that, will you actually end up at a point in the future where you feel like you can say that to yourself? I don't know the answer to that, right? It's like, if we change one piece of history, do we ruin the rest of it? So,
the reason I asked if it was worth it or not is because I feel like that. I don't know if anxiety is the right word. It's some combination of drive and anxiety is the thing that propels you to stay up an extra hour when you're already falling asleep, to turn, one extra rock to find out, what mechanism of cold email outreach is the most efficient way of doing, and things like that. Insert here, whatever you're trying to figure out. But yeah, I think it's a gift and a curse. Before we wrap, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what you don't want is, you don't want that sense of, I have to be doing more. I'm falling behind. You don't want that to turn into self-pity. That, oh, I'm not as far along. Look at everybody else. I'm such a loser. Why is everybody else succeeding and not me? Self-pity is a useless emotion. It is a damaging emotion. There is no redeeming value in self-pity. It is not beneficial to take that attitude. And so if you find yourself sliding into self-pity, you have to stop that shit right then and there. Say, nope, I don't get to do this. I don't get to wallow. Wherever spot I'm at is where I'm at. And now what do I need to do to fix it? But don't allow yourself to fall into that because it'll destroy you.
Well, yeah, it's like the difference between the scarcity and abundance mindset, which I don't think actually gets enough airtime, in my opinion, right? Like you can look at other people who have been successful in a field and you can say, wow, holy shit, it's totally possible. Especially if you meet them. Sometimes you'll meet somebody and like, there's this big debate that I've seen online. I think it was like 6 months ago. It came out as going viral, where you can be too high IQ. You can be too much of an overthinker to where you don't take action. Vice the person who's quote unquote dumber will just like blindly push forward, right? And just try stuff, and they'll make it work, right? But they're taking action and they actually end up getting somewhere. But yeah, the pity thing is a good point. I think that's being counterproductive. Before we wrap, don't worry, I'm not going to ask you any like meaning of life questions. But
good, because I don't have any answers.
No, man, I'm not Lex Friedman, but I'm sure you've seen that pod. What are you excited about in the space, in the internet marketing space, in building a personal brand? Like what as somebody who has a really good pulse on the market and is really in tune with what's going on, what are you excited about? What are you worried about? Just kind of give a little synopsis on what is it today? April 25th, 2024.
I think what I'm most excited about has nothing to do with the industry as a whole. I think it has more to do with the way communication is evolving to a point where in the very near future, the way we work with clients, the way that we engage with them is going to change radically. So I am not at all interested in artificial intelligence. I think 99% of what's being sold around AI right now is complete and total BS. Like AI does not do what they say it will do. All of the apps and things that you see being created are more trouble than they're worth. People are selling how to with AI or simplify with AI, and it's all being sold to these lowest common denominator people. And so I have no interest in it at all. In a couple of years, after they've worked out all the bugs and we see what it actually is and what it really can do, then maybe we'll take a look at it. But what really excites me is I don't know if you saw on Lex's show when he did the VR demonstration with Zuckerberg. Did you see that?
Yep. Of Oculus.
Yeah, of Oculus. I am blown away. In a very short period of time, the next 5 to 10 years or so, we're going to live in a world where you and I will not do conversation like this, where I'm looking at your video and you're looking at my video. We're going to put on a pair of glasses and we're going to enter a virtual space that will be largely indistinguishable from real life. And we are going to be able to interact and engage with people all over the world in real time, in person, right? In terms of what I'll be able to do with that, in terms of helping my clients, it blows me away. In terms of building community, think of how social media is going to change when people aren't typing. We went from the old chat rooms to now we have things like Instagram and Twitter, right? But what's the next thing going to be? It's going to be all of us like virtually getting in a room that looks like a real room and talking to people from all over the world that we wouldn't otherwise have a chance to meet. It's going to change the landscape of how we connect with each other. And I think it's going to be in a much more positive way than social media was. Because unlike social media, where you kind of hide behind and you talk shit to people and it just is kind of a nasty dumpster fire, man, it's going to be more like meeting people in the real world. And that hopefully we'll be able to create some really civil places where we can learn and engage in a way that we never could before. That's the most exciting thing to me about the space.
Yeah, man, it's going to be the difference between 2D and 3D. I think that people are going to finally be able to have deep human interactions at scale. Because this is, I know you in person, this is a completely different experience than talking to you. Like than talking to you face to face.
Yep.
But it'll be damn close when they get that going.
It will be much, much closer to a real world experience than what we can have. I spend a lot of time on group coaching calls and talking with clients on video screens like Zoom. And I live for the day when I can actually sit in a room with my clients and I can draw on the whiteboard and everybody can see and we can hang out and talk and have that mastermind experience that you could only get right now by flying to a location to meet all the people that you want to do business with or you want to work with. Just a lot of opportunities that are coming. I think it's a great industry, despite the fact that there are a lot of numbskulls in the space. There are a lot of really great people who are knowledgeable and who want to see other people succeed. And that's one of the reasons I stay in it.
Dude, that's awesome. Well, we'll have to do a follow-up, as things get closer and closer. I'm sure we'll be talking more about it and figuring out ways that we can both implement it. But dude, thanks so much for coming on. I'm going to throw all your links down below. X, you have a YouTube channel, which the podcast is hosted on there as well, right?
Yeah, it's on there too.
Yeah, it's all in one. And then of course your link tree there, I'll post it as well. Dude, perfect. Thanks for coming on. And man, I'm a huge admirer of the way you communicate and the things that you know. I can't wait to keep learning.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me on.
My pleasure, man. Take care.